All right, today we're going to be talking about Chapter 14, the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. In the first part of this chapter, we got a pretty good handle on the layout of the two divisions, these two motor divisions of the autonomic nervous system. Now we'll take a little closer look at the layout of the sympathetic nervous system, and then we'll look at the functions of those two divisions, specific functions on an organ-by-organ basis. So we said that the sympathetic neurons arise in the lateral horn of the spinal cord gray matter, and the motor neurons emerge in the ventral root of the spinal nerve, and then those axons branch out of the spinal nerve through this white ramus here, this rami communicans, into the chain ganglia, a long chain of ganglia all along the spinal column. That's where many of the sympathetic preganglionic neurons synapse. The postganglionic neurons then enter back into the spinal nerve and then travel to the target organs. Just kind of a little bit closer look at that process. Here's an even more incisive investigation. Some of the sympathetic preganglionic neurons enter into the chain ganglia, synapse to the postganglionic neuron, which then travels out to the effector organ and releases norepinephrine. But some of the preganglionic sympathetic neurons in the lateral horn here travel into the spinal nerve through the white rami communicans and then up to the more superior ganglion in the chain, the sympathetic chain, back into the spinal nerve and then out to the effector organs. And finally, some of the sympathetic preganglionic neurons enter into the spinal nerve, branch to the white rami communicans, and then skip the chain and synapse at a collateral ganglion, another ganglion in the abdominal cavity. So there are some other ganglia in the chain, just so you're aware of them. We're not going to entertain them by name, but I just want you to know that there are sympathetic ganglia in the abdominal cavity other than the chain ganglia. Here's just a little, a different stylized schematic diagram of the sympathetic nervous system showing this chain ganglia, or actually collateral ganglia. Got it. All right. We also talked in the very first diagram we had of the layout of the sympathetic nervous system that some of the preganglionic neurons not only skip the chain ganglia but synapse with gland cells in the adrenal medulla. Those gland cells in the adrenal medulla arise from the same tissue as the postganglionic neurons. It's just that they become gland cells instead and release the neurotransmitter norepinephrine as well as epinephrine right into the blood, and therefore they become hormones. But they activate all the sympathetic nervous system target organs in that way. All right, let's take a look at the organ-by-organ functions of the two divisions. We'll start with the parasympathetic, the so-called rest and digest division, which releases acetylcholine onto its target organs. Long preganglionic neurons, ganglia at the target organs, short postganglionic neurons. All right. In the eye, the pupil of the eye specifically, the smooth muscle is activated by the parasympathetic nervous system that constricts the pupils, closes them down. This is sharper vision for this relaxed, very detailed activity is being conducted during this kind of leisure. Salivary glands, everything about digestion is activated by the sympathetic nervous system. So the large volumes of saliva that come into your oral cavity as you eat food, they're stimulated by the parasympathetic fibers releasing acetylcholine. As much as a half a liter of saliva whenever you eat a meal. The heart, well, the parasympathetic neurons decrease the heart rate. And it turns out that at rest, the parasympathetic nervous system is what's controlling your heart rate. The native pacing of the pacemaker of the heart is much faster, maybe 110 beats per minute. But the parasympathetic nervous system has tone, meaning it's always releasing acetylcholine onto the pacemaker, slowing it down. So as you're sitting here at rest reading this or listening to this, the parasympathetic tone is what's controlling your heart rate. So that's an important thing to remember, like an example of where there's parasympathetic tone. In the lungs, the parasympathetic neurons cause bronchoconstriction. Smooth muscle in the lungs contracts, reducing the diameter of the bronchi. We don't need the maximum caliber of these airways when we're not doing anything. We're resting. We have a lot of reserve to bring in air during exercise. We don't need all that capacity at rest. So again, everything to do with digestion. The small intestine and large intestine, GI tract, the stomach as well. The pancreas is an accessory organ of digestion, and the liver as well. All of the processes that have to do with digestion in those organs are activated by the parasympathetic nervous system. When you smell food, think about food, see food, and then finally eat food, all of those things by way of various types of receptors stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system kind of digestion. The pancreas will be stimulated to release insulin, which helps us take up all those nutrients once digestion takes place, largely by the action of enzymes produced by the pancreas that go into the intestine. Once we digest all those foodstuffs down to their building blocks, those will be absorbed into the blood. Insulin will allow them to be stored and induce them to be stored. So glycogen is the stored form of glucose. Glucose can also be stored as fat, converted to fatty acid and stored as fat. Lipids from the diet can be stored as fat, so forth. Amino acids, insulin stimulates protein synthesis, storing away, building, using the time of plenty for building. The pancreas makes those enzymes, the liver produces bile, and we'll see in a later chapter that is important for absorbing lipids from the diet. The bladder, when you deem an appropriate location and time to empty your bladder, it's a parasympathetic reflex that will take over and contract that bladder wall muscle and release a smooth muscle sphincter of valve and relief that allows you to urinate. All right, the sympathetic nervous system dilates the pupils. Pretty much everything on the left-hand side of the parasympathetic nervous system does. The sympathetic nervous system is an antagonistic division. It does the opposite kinds of things. So the sympathetic nervous system dilates the pupils, let more light in order to accomplish whatever defensive or offensive tasks that will win the day in some stressful situation. The hypothalamus is in charge of maintaining your body temperature, and one of the homeostatic strategies that it employs is activation of sweat glands in your dermis of your skin so that evaporative heat loss will account for extra heat being produced from your body, say by working muscles. That way your body temperature can remain relatively constant. Now this is an example of discrete activation of an effector organ by the sympathetic pathway. When you activate the sweat glands in the skin, that is done independent of all the other sympathetic organs being activated. Salivary glands, why do you get dry mouth when you're afraid or angry and so forth? Sympathetic nervous system stimulates a different population of salivary gland cells in the parasympathetic division, and they produce a small volume of sticky saliva. The sympathetic nervous system causes bronchodilation. It relaxes the smooth muscle in the airways so that you can breathe a lot of volume of air in and out. Breathe more frequently and deeply and get more air in, more oxygen in to bring into the blood to use those working muscles for exercise and so forth. You probably knew that because of the EpiPen that some people carry in an emergency if they have inflammation in the lungs or in the blood. Histamine causes bronchoconstriction. They may need a epinephrine pen, a syringe to inject some epinephrine to fight bronchodilation so you can breathe freely again. The heart, the sympathetic nervous system is all about changes that take place during exercise. It increases heart rate and the force of contraction of the heart, so it pumps a lot more blood out. More frequently it's beating and pumping out blood, and it's doing it more vigorously, pumping out a larger volume to repeat, so we can supply those working muscles. The sympathetic nervous system inhibits virtually every aspect of digestion. The stomach, the intestines, their motility, meaning the muscle contraction and the secretions are going to be suppressed. The pancreas is, instead of releasing insulin, going to release an antagonistic hormone called glucagon. We're going to take those stored forms of nutrients and release them back out into the blood to provide energy sources for working muscles. So glucagon causes the liver to release glucose into the blood. Causes the pancreas, causes the adipose tissue to release fatty acids into the blood. So glucose and fatty acids are the two main fuels of cells of your body. Some of the preganglionic fibers, we said, innervate the adrenal medulla, the inner part of the adrenal gland, and this is just recapitulating that point, so that if you start exercising, the adrenal gland, the adrenal medulla, will release these neurotransmitters/hormones, and they'll activate all of the sympathetic target organs. It's called a diffuse response because instead of being discrete neurons that are being activated in each case, it's everywhere. Oops. Blood vessels. Here's a really important one. Please pay attention to this one. Sympathetic nervous system causes vasoconstriction in most blood vessels, veins, arteries, arterioles, tiny arteries, in your skin, in your kidneys, your digestive tract organs. A lot of organs in your body are going to take away blood flow to those organs by vasoconstricting. That's one thing that happens to the sympathetic nervous system does during exercise is to then redistribute that blood that would have gone to those organs to the working muscles. But when you're not exercising, this is also an important function of the sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic fibers have tone that are constantly releasing norepinephrine to all those smooth muscle cells of the blood vessels throughout your body 24/7. That's how you control the blood pressure in the short term. If you need to raise the blood pressure, you can just cause additional sympathetic output and vasoconstriction throughout the body. It'll raise the blood pressure. And if you have to lower the blood pressure, it's already too high, you can reduce the sympathetic tone to all those smooth muscle cells in the blood vessels, and they will vasodilate, and it doesn't go back down. So maintaining the blood pressure has to do with sympathetic tone, the degree of sympathetic tone at all of your blood vessels all of the time. The bladder. The sympathetic nervous system causes that smooth muscle sphincter or valve in the urethra to constrict, so making it harder to release urine. You may have noticed at times when you've been especially feeling awkward, feeling like it's not the ideal situation, but you really have to go really badly. And sometimes when that happens, you can't pee, you need to pee really bad because of the sympathetic nervous system. Your anxiety is activating that sphincter, and it seals off the bladder. The one instance where the two divisions work in cooperation, the parasympathetic nervous system causes vasoconstriction that leads to erection of the genitals, and the sympathetic nervous system promotes reflexes of ejaculation and vaginal peristalsis. So these two systems work together to complete the sexual function so that procreation can be possible. Some sociobiologists even think that's the sole purpose for your desire for survival is to carry on your germ line or your genetic line, but I'm not so sure about that. But anyway, this is a very important function of the body that is controlled by cooperation of these two otherwise antagonistic divisions. Visceral reflexes. One last subject for this section. Just like we talked about somatic reflexes in chapter 13, there are visceral reflexes that involve autonomic neurons, autonomic sensory neurons in your organs, unipolar neurons, nevertheless, that synapse with motor neurons in the spinal cord typically, but then carry on. This is a sympathetic nervous system pathway that carry on the pathway to the target organs and cause a reflex response. So a lot of things, for example, if you eat food and food begins to enter your stomach and distend your stomach and change the osmolarity and pH in there, that's going to cause reflex activation of muscle contraction and secretion in the stomach. And in fact, there's actually a lot of reflexes that are housed right in the walls of the digestive tract. It's estimated there's as many neurons in the walls of your digestive tract as there are in your entire spinal cord. That's how complex the nervous system of the digestive tract is, this automated system, but lots of reflexes are found there too. All right, so join me next time for part 3, and we'll take another look farther into the autonomic nervous system.